we'll be notifying all the departments and all the whole supply arrangement holders and everyone at the end of this month of our new location, and that will be effective in mid-August. And we'll also notify again at the end of July, just to let people know. Other news, QualiWare 10.4.2, I guess is the number, is out and available. And it's on our download site. So if you don't have credentials and your area of responsibility is picking up those new versions, please go to the support portal and make a request, or if you've forgotten that, what your credentials were, they can definitely update those for you. We also recently ran a bit of a presentation for SAP Solution Manager. QualiWare has an interface now with SAP Solution Manager, and we have a copy of the documentation associated with that. It's not the technical details, but it does describe from a user perspective what or how QualiWare will interact with Solution Manager. Right now, it's a one-way interface from Solution Manager into QualiWare, and the Solution Manager process models, which are similar but not BPMN compliant, are pulled into a BPMN-like model in QualiWare as well. In Solution Manager, there's some objects and artifacts that are not part of the BPMN standard. So we take those into an extended BPMN model in QualiWare so that they can then be integrated with the other process models and other types of models that you have in QualiWare. So we'll be posting that interface documentation shortly to our website, and we'll notify primary, secondary, and technical contacts. And there will also be on our blog with a link to download that. I think everybody's heard by now that we were given a 2-year extension to the GCEA solution contract, and the first additional option year, our 6th in total, was exercised. And want to say thanks to CBSA, CRA, CFIA, ESTC, Global Affairs, ISED, and Shared Services for getting your maintenance and support information to PSPC. We're still waiting for PSPC, RCMP, and NRC as well to follow up with their information so that we can get the annual maintenance and support, which is expires today, actually. So we're expecting another contract amendment coming from PSPC shortly. So if you haven't already, I know things a lot of times are hung up in the departmental procurement process, but anything you can do to push that along would be great. Coming up in September, we're going to be running Louise Harris's organizational change course that she's presented a few times. It talks about stakeholder engagement, organizational change, and how to manage that. And it is a 4-week course. It's part-time. There's takeaway readings and exercises to do, and then there's joint sessions. So you can look for that on the CloseReach website. We're also making other changes to the training portion of our website, specifically around our Flex training packages. We're actually relaunching those as subscriptions because there have been some procurement people in various departments that have had issue with the idea of paying for training in advance of actually taking a course. However, they don't have any problems with buying subscriptions, which run over a period. So we're rebranding all of our flex training to a subscription model. So, and the flex training offers all of the same courses that you can buy individually, but a pretty good savings in terms of cost, you know, well beyond the 15% that you get for 3 people attending the same course. We're
Kevin,
also,
sorry, this is Dan. Did you say a date for that?
For that rebranding?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're hoping to have all that done by Thursday.
Oh, it's this week? Okay.
Yep.
All right, perfect, thanks.
Yeah, it's not going to take, we're already fairly long, you know, a fair way down that path to get that done, just waiting on a couple of things, so.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. In June, we are going to start a new group. It is a special interest group for quality management and compliance. So a bit of a spin-off of the QualiWare user group, but it's going to be solely focused in the quality management space and the compliance space. And so we are you know, not going to be talking about enterprise architecture. We will be talking about things like non-conformances and corrective actions and audits and compliance with standards, whether those are ISO standards or departmental policy, those types of things. So a little bit different focus than our group here. And we'll be kicking that off. Cecile, I don't have the date.
I think it's the 17th, and I'm saying that
Yeah.
really slowly with a question in my voice.
Yes, it is actually. Sorry, you're right. It's the 17th, and it's a meeting that's going to run from 3 until 4:30. And really, this is how we actually started the QualiWare user group. We got interested parties together, and at that organizing meeting sort of determined the structure of the meetings, how, you know, how we would run them, you know, and engage with everybody who was interested. So that's not the time that it will be, you know, it'll be up to the group actually to set the time for when how often, frequency, and when we're going to run these meetings. But the organizing meeting will be on the 17th at 3 p.m. And there will be a posting about that on our website for those that want to join the meeting. But you know, again, the focus will be in that particular space. So, and we think, you know, we have ISED using QualiWare for ISO compliance. We're talking to the Coast Guard, and we're pretty far down the path. Eric and the people from QED, Quality Engineering Test Establishment, you know, are using QualiWare to implement quality management system for ISO 17025. And we're going to be doing the same thing for our 27001 compliance, as well as 9000. So for our own internal use. And we're currently moving down the path with having an internal resource as well, an internal quality manager here at CloseReach. So we think it's, as I say, a growing market, and so we're going to start the special interest group. And I think that's all I have, other than to say J-Val and his wife had their baby, which is a good thing.
Yes.
Still waiting for some details on that.
Yes.
And Annette, welcome to the CloseReach team. Annette's kind of working part-time for us for a short period, and then we'll be on full-time. But she's helping us with our move to our new business management system, Striven, and which will have a number of different portals, which will make it easier for people to interact with us and you know, improve our level of support. So
Okay.
over to you, Cecile.
Okay, now we're at the exciting time where I'm going to try to do a poll. And I have never done a poll in Go to Training before, so this may or may not work. So I'm just, as you can tell, I am giving you a little bit of an advance warning to see if this actually will work. So bear with me for a moment to see if this will actually work. And so my question is, should we pause the user group meetings until September? And you should have in the bottom of your screen the section where the polls, and you get to vote. And we'll just let Pardon?
I don't get to vote.
How
That's
come?
not fair.
Oh, you don't get to vote.
It says organizers do not vote.
You should have joined with your own name. That's
There you go.
Okay, while everyone's voting,
last year we ran them through the summer. I mean, it gave people something else to do with COVID just coming on, but we figured we'd ask this year.
Yes, exactly. Okay, let's see. We've got 83% of the people have voted. I'm going to give everybody 5 more seconds before we close. Oh, 88%. Oh, maybe I'll give 5 more seconds. 92% voted. Oh, come on, everybody. Everyone vote. Oh, we're so close. Oh, 96%. Okay, I'm going to close the poll. All right.
No, it says 100% on mine.
Does it? Oh,
yeah, it says 61% said yes and 39% said no.
Yes, but 96% of the people voted. See, down at the bottom right-hand side. Anyway, I'm going to close the poll. So thank you very much, everyone. Looks like our results are in that, yes, we will pause until September. And so we will be in touch with the details for the meeting in September. But it does lead me to ask everyone to please send me any ideas, thoughts, topics that you would like to have for the user group meetings. We've gone back and forth over the year with having some very technical presentations, and then others like today that are more non-QualiWare specific presentations that are more professional development type related topics. So I would be really interested in hearing from you as to what kind of content you would be interested in when our meetings start up again in September. So,
or if there are departments that would like to share some of what they've been doing in QualiWare, we'd be very interested in in having you share that with the rest of the group. In the past, we've had CBSA share what they're doing, and ESDC and National Defense. So we'd be interested in having any ideas or things that people have gotten to work and delivered value within their organization. We'd be interested in sharing that with the rest of the team, the rest of the group. So
great, thank you, Kevin. Okay, so we've come to the part of the meeting where we're going to have our featured speaker today. His name is Chris Carter from Orgshift Solutions, and Chris is going to present us with some interesting ways to make meetings that are going wrong, how to make them go right and be more interactive. Chris has actually put some comments in the chat panel for everyone to have a look at. And while you're looking at that, I'm going to pass things over to Chris.
Excellent.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Over to you.
So welcome, everybody, and thanks for carving out this time to have an interactive session with me, trying to help make it happen. To be clear, This is an expert panel that I'm engaging with here, that there is an expectation of participation in this session, because the answers, while I have a few things to share with you, some insights that I've gleaned over the years, especially in the last 15 months of the pandemic. But over the years, I've got some ideas and some things to share. But in the main, this group is going to create some of the answers for yourselves, and hopefully by doing so, you'll learn about some different ways to challenge your assumptions about what does it mean to meet virtually. How can you in fact make them more engaging, more interesting, and get better output from it, and perhaps even better outcomes. And for those who do modeling, especially in the enterprise business architecture space, know what I'm talking about when I say that. So the tool we're using today is Mentimeter, and so I would like to get a sense of from the group, but where you're at with respect to connecting to it. You know, it's as hard as going to menti.com, either in an alternative browser window, and for those with multiple screens, and gosh, I know enterprise business architects always have multiple screens going on, and using the code. It is kind of nice to be able to use it on the phone or your tablet. It works quite nicely that way, and so I'm seeing some comments. So you've already started to see some of the interactive aspects of Mentimeter as a platform. And I'd like to point out a couple other things. Is that if you do have a question, basically you can use your pad to enter in a question, and we'll take that up at the end. They are not moderated questions, so please be polite, and we'll review those in sequence, and have a good chat about that. Do upvote other people's questions. So if you see a question that's already actually been asked, or you think that's a good one, just upvote it. Please feel free to share comments and click on emojis just to get you a sense of where things are going. So this, I'm showing you a different mode here about how we can interact together. So I'm also going to move forward. So you can see my hair is longer now than it was when I took that, at that time, a pretty awful picture. However, I'm thinking that John Tory is the mayor of Toronto, is my hero right now, and then when he gets a haircut is when I'm going to get a haircut. And so you're just going to have to put up with this as it stands right now. I got introduced to Kevin back in 2015 and the entire QualiWare platform when I was part of KPMG's Defense Renewal Program team, and we used QualiWare extensively to do logic models, value logic models, outcome models for each and every of the 34 different initiatives that made up the Defense Renewal Program at that time. And that was just a ton of fun. And that's how I got to know CloseReach and the QualiWare platform. I have used extensively within the KPMG empire around the world, Eris, because they ended up choosing Eris, so boo, but they didn't know about QualiWare, presumably, when they made that choice. I've also been a longtime user, though not active these days, is Sparks. So I'm pretty familiar with the various platforms around enterprise business architecture. Long-time transformation professional at whatever level you want to talk about, with a special emphasis, just like with defense renewal, around benefits realization and change management and managing change in the larger sense. I've had a long time interest ever since I got into the consultation game, not quite 30 years ago, in group facilitation and decision making. And this is just a logical extension of that, is how do you do this better when you're forced to do it this way? But here's the news, folks. It ain't going to get easier when the pandemic's over, when it comes to interacting with groups. It's actually going to get harder. And the reason it's going to get harder is because of hybrid. Hybrid workplace is coming. It's already here in many ways, many cases. And I think to a certain degree, we were actually a little bit in denial about it in the past. That wherever work happens, wherever you happen to be, and if today it's at home, tomorrow it could be in a shared workspace, and especially for us consultants who are contracting, as many of you are, to various parts of the government of Canada. I mean, right now you're working at home, but tomorrow could be somewhere else, and you're moving around. And your clients are going to be doing the same thing too. It's some days they're going to be in the office, some days they're going to be at home. So it isn't going to get easier. So therefore, that just provides an even greater imperative to learn how to do this better, to not just rely on what Teams provides you as sort of stock standard functions, or even better, Zoom. And there are some great features within each of those platforms. And Teams, Microsoft just pours money into that platform, and you're seeing more and more happening there. But they still have a long way to go to make them truly interactive and beyond just a better video platform. Okay, so let's move on from there. So our agenda today is we're going to discuss as a group with this expert panel, what are some of the challenges with working virtually, and especially running meetings virtually. And then I'm going to unpack what that means a little bit. How do we break it down into, here's a good analysis thing for us architects, how do we analyze this, and then how do we build it back up again around what good looks like. And no good consulting project either, or presentation either has a 2x2 of some kind, right? Or maybe a maturity model. So I've got a digital capability maturity model, and it's scattered throughout this presentation. I've got tools and tips. So so now that the interaction begins. So using however you've gotten into menti.com, I'd like you to, we're going to build a word cloud in real time here. What word or short phrase, preferably word, describes your experience with meeting virtually and some of the tools that are available? I'm not talking about just the things like Zoom or Teams, but also some of the other things that you can add on to. So I'm looking for input here from the group about what word or short phrase, and if nobody interacts, then there's a problem. Okay. So this is interesting. So two people have responded saying excellent, but then we've also got not efficient. Some people think it's effective, some people say it's seamless and it's very convenient. But there are issues, like things like over talking, things like daunting, things like nervousness. Sure. What other experiences single words can capture your experience here? The phrase of 2020, you're on mute. Stressful, sure. Bad hair, thank you. I'm going to take that as a compliment. Mystified, oh my, maybe when we get to the next section, somebody can unpack that one for me. I guess I know I get confused between the different platforms, because unmuting is different here on GoToTraining. It's different again in Teams. It's different again in Zoom. And on another project I'm running with right now, I'm also for the University of Alberta, where they're using Google. So it's like, it's all over the place. Not everyone participates. Well, I'm hoping, not enough screens. I'm hoping this gives you a sense of different ways. Bandwidth issues, absolutely. Some technical challenges. Concatenated, fragmented, yes, absolutely. Okay, so this gives you a sense of a cutting out. Thank you for that too. Different, what our experience is, and so now we're going to drill down into it a bit more. So thank you for that. I'm going to move the screen on. By the way, all of this is going to be sent out to you afterwards. So we're not going to lose the expertise of the group here. Okay, so what challenges then? So clearly some of those things were challenges and unsurprising, but it was really good to see, which I think is the reality of our existence over the last 15 months, that we have turned lemons into lemonade to a certain degree. We can create positive experiences and interactions with using through virtual means. So, but what challenges? Now here's your opportunity to provide a slightly longer answer, to elaborate. And so we're mystified. I would love to have a bit more about what did you mean by mystification? So here you get a chance to actually enter in a sentence. You can elaborate beyond a word. Whereas before we were building a word cloud, which is just one way of tapping into where's the group at any one time. But here, what are some of those things? So disconnection is one. Getting everyone engaged and committed to the end result. Absolutely. So that is a very positive. Oh, sorry, that's the challenge. Sorry, I answered my own question. In groups where one person, yeah, the person that dominates, the verbal, like I'm doing now, right? This is the nature of the medium. I'm the one who gets to talk and hold the talking stick. Yeah. Geographical, as much as we think we can be virtual and meet at any time, anywhere, there are challenges. Tough to read the body language. I hope you're seeing that I'm modeling being a bit more, bigger. I'm trying to fill the virtual void here. That's very much. Bandwidth, choppy interactions. I know Kevin well, so he won't mind me teasing him on it. Because he's gone that rural, which is a huge challenge for Canada. Internet, and I think he's using Starlink these days. I could be wrong about that. But that's pretty cool. But occasionally he does get a little choppy, which there you go. Take that for what you will. The bandwidth. Thank you. All the same challenges as in-person meetings. That is absolutely dead on. It's a meeting, right? Those don't go away. And all the things that are best practices for that, absolutely. Mentimeter is now providing a way of scrolling down and forth, which is why it flicks off and on and so forth. But screen space, how much real estate can you have? And a sense of helplessness when you get stuck. I actually had a client. I was facilitating a meeting a few weeks ago with a colleague, Stephen Davies, actually, Peter Dick, by the way. Who Peter and Stephen and I used to work together with the same company, Chartwell, many moons ago. That we had a client representative as part of a team was having connection challenges and couldn't get to a particular part and was quite literally freaking out about it. And so we had to sort of step back. It turns out she had a browser thing set incorrectly, so she wasn't able to get. Things were just disappearing on her. She ended up with like 20 open tabs and couldn't actually get through. So once we fix that, but it just speaks to the nervousness and the how on edge we all are, right? Performance, thank you. That's a really excellent idea. Sharing information from too many different sources. So how do you keep people engaged? Use of flip charts. We used to do that in person. So how do we do something like that? This is one way of doing it that I'm showing today. Okay, these are all great points about impromptu meetings are virtual. That's so true. They're virtually non-existent. Everything has to now be scheduled. And they have to, of course, run into each other, and they always overlap because they're never done on time, usually. It's just, I know that's my experience. By the way, I'm on a project. One of my projects are on the go right now is with PSPC over on the Government of Canada Trusted Platform side into the Digital Services branch. And that is absolutely the case, that we just, everything has to be, you can't phone anybody anymore just to have a conversation. You have to send them an email or send them a text, say, can we talk? It's an interesting thing that's happened over the last, over this time. Okay, I'm gonna move on. Now, if you want to go back and add items to it, where's the water cooler chats? You can't walk the hallways anymore. You can add, but I am going to move on right now, okay? So some of the challenges I've experienced, which should replicate some of the things that we've already seen, we talked about the technologies, that you need even more preparation. And you need to do rehearsals, and you need to. So in preparation for this meeting, Cecile and I had a couple of different setups and chats and tests, and hopefully I didn't freak you out too much, Cecile, by having a meeting, of course, run overtime before I got onto this one.
No, only slightly, but not really.
Larger groups, thank you. Larger groups can be problematic, and so how do you manage that as a design component? We talked about the loss of visual and body language. Trust can starts low, and it can be hard to build. And if you don't, if the group's been working together for a while, that's one thing. But when it's a diverse group, tough. And you know what? And that's true in person too. It's especially true in virtual. People talked about camera, no camera. To build trust, camera, yes. except if the group was already, has established a pattern and has other mechanisms for building trust. And I think the need for facilitation, the need for design, the need to work against biases, especially if you're trying to make a decision. Oh, has anybody actually tried to make a decision over virtual channels? That's tough. That can be really tough. And in fact, but we need to do this. We have no other choice, especially when we move to the hybrid. And then if you present too much, my gosh, it's boring. It's just so boring. Anyways, and I'm sure you could add on to that list. So here we're going to do something a little different. Again, I'm trying to create a different way of interacting. I'm going to voice over my own video here. And here what I'm doing is I'm unpacking what we used to do in person from a workshop perspective. Now, if you think about yourselves in your roles, especially as architects and modelers using QualiWare, the world's best enterprise business architecture platform, bar none, is when you're running a workshop, you can, I'm expecting payment in the mail, Kevin. I'm assuming that's you that just hearted me. You run workshops, you use walls, you use sticky notes, you use pens and paper, whatever you have, and dots. Well, that's what we used to do, and I'm sure that's what you do when you're doing process design. It's all about interacting with your stakeholders. So here's what we used to do in person, using whatever tools for whatever things that we were doing it with, right? These are all the different sort of use cases here. And I've broken down it into 8 different sort of sub-steps. I've unpacked it. So here we go. We're brainstorming now, or we're crowdsourcing, to use a clever word that starts with C. All the notes are going up on the board, right? And then the next step would be, okay, now we need to, maybe there's an opportunity to ask clarifying questions, or maybe do commenting. So I've used more blue stickies to do that. Now we need to clean it up, because there's a really good chance we got some duplicates up there. And everybody there's always at least one person puts 3 ideas on one sticky note instead of 3 ideas on 3 separate sticky notes. So we gotta pull them apart, right? So that's a cleanup exercise. And then the next step would be categorizing. So we could have done this as an input to the brainstorming. If we're doing risk analysis, for example, we could use the risk categories, or we can add them later. So, but that's a really good sense-making, affinity grouping in another way. Then we can bring out the dots. Which ones are the most important, or I call it concentrating. And then eventually we can sort of organize this. Then we can fall into this role called compare. Really, it's rating. So we're going to, for a select few, we're going to do some deeper analysis using some scales. So if these were risks, we would do things like, what's the impact, what's the probability, and then, because we're doing high, low, or whatever. Then we can scope, what I've called costing, because it's usually dollars. If these were ideas for change, for example, or projects, they would have a cost. They would have other scoping kind of parameters too. Ultimately, we're making a choice. These are the ones we've selected because they happen to have the highest priority. So now I'm just going to move on to the next slide, just to be able to show that now that we're done. So you can see that we've ultimately made a choice of those 4 were the ones we decided. Now they happen to be the top rated. They didn't necessarily have to be top rated. And what I also didn't show was through the dialogue, we could have had some exchanges being made. That through the conversation, we actually decided that maybe one of the ones at the bottom here could have been the ones that should, because through the dialogue, even though they didn't get the voting, you still want to have a good chance. So just we've just unpacked what we used to do in person from a workshop perspective, right? This isn't just a status meeting or something, but even that sometimes you need good ways of interacting and getting input. So let's go further. So we need to, when we don't want to replicate what we used to do. We actually need to do in person. We need to do it differently, but there are some principles, there are some guidelines and designs, and just some basic how we need to work together to be able to get the best out of each other as a group. We need to fall back on some basic things. But we should reframe virtual, the idea of virtual meetings. I'm trying to reframe them as more like digitally enabled interactions or digital interactions. So we need to challenge the notion, in my view, that meeting virtually is not as good as in person. Sometimes it's not as good. Not going to argue with that, but it is different, and therefore, if something's different, we need to be able to perhaps, again, turn lemons into lemonade, as I say at the bottom here, and try to extract the best out of what makes sense to be done virtually, what makes sense to be done differently virtually that we would used to do in person, and so forth. We need to go beyond what just comes with Zoom. Again, love-hate relationship with that platform. For those, can I just have a sidebar here? It and Teams shows all of the most negative aspects of an agile development approach. Just saying, right? It's just one thing getting piled on to pile on. I don't think quite enough. Teams maybe more so than Zoom, a little bit better. So I'll give them Microsoft a little bit of a credit here. They weren't thinking enough architecturally, in my view. I don't think they did enough designing of the infrastructure underlying those platforms. They just keep adding on little pieces here and there. At some point, they're going to need to do a fundamental rethink about how they enable all of this. Otherwise, it'll just go into the dustbin of yet another series of programs that we don't use anymore, my view. Okay, back on topic, Chris. We need to design and moderate or facilitate an end-to-end process. What are you trying to achieve, and what are all the steps to getting there? We also need to understand, and this was really interesting when I was presenting this particular webinar to the International Association of Facilitators a few months ago, and I was encouraged by the sponsor of that group to look, facilitators have had to adjust to going virtually, just like everybody else has had to do so. So that you don't need to tell them about the benefits of going virtual. That's not the thing. But I think you do need to help them get past perhaps some resistance aspects and barriers that would be with their clients they might be working with, and perhaps their peers, but probably most importantly, the barriers within themselves, especially the assumptions or the worldview that you bring to the table, that there's no way that'll work. Well, maybe in this world we need to try to be a little more open-minded. So we need to reflect on what is stopping us from perhaps trying on some different things. Okay, so back to this expert panel here. Enough of me, though I get to keep talking, so sorry. Not sorry. Thinking about when you've actually enjoyed a virtual interaction or a digital interaction, aka virtual meeting, either as an attendee or when you've been facilitating one and you thought it went off especially well. Can you come up with a single word that comes to mind? What's that single word that would encapsulate that experience? And you get to vote more than once, by the way. So humor me. Yeah, you got to make it fun. You're trying to make it so engaged. You felt engaged. Let's see. So that's two people that put up ideas. Agility. So that's a really important point. How do you stay nimble? A consulting facilitation friend of mine wrote the book called The Nimble Facilitator, and that's it. You have a plan, and then you adjust as required. So being openness. Providing an openness, having a variety of content, making it interactive, those experiences that were positive, you felt you understood. That's great. Anything else? A high level of satisfaction. You felt entertained. It was interactive. You felt heard. Communion. Well, that's a great word. That's a great word. It would be interesting to look. I'm going to pick up on sort of a religious theme here. It would be interesting to look at how churches and religious gatherings and so forth, what they looked like over a year ago when they were forced to go virtual, and what they look like now. That would be a very interesting study. Gamification. Oh, okay. I'm going to have to ask the person who put that up to talk about that later. but yes, these platforms can be gamed. There's no doubt about it, and that's one of the things you need to design for, especially if you go public consultations. Time hog, they can be, and that's where I have some ideas about how to make them less time hoggy. I could borrow that word. Okay, playing trivia, sure. I play cards with my mother-in-law, my aunt-in-law, who live not that far away, but we have a not quite weekly euchre game electronically now, which is kind of fun. Okay, I'm going to move on in the interest of time. So I'm going to ask you a question now. So I don't think I missed everything. Is that right? That's the word. Sorry, I just wanted to double check. So thinking about of tools, and we haven't talked about them much. Obviously, Mentimeter's a tool and Zoom's a tool and so forth. But how would you rate your proficiency from tricycle, meaning really entry level, through basic, more advanced features? Maybe you've used the chat. Sure, everybody's used the chat. But what about the whiteboard? Have you used the whiteboard? And anything? Have you ever been encouraged to use the whiteboard? Have you ever put up a process map and had people start scribbling on it electronically? That's a great thing to do. I think that's one of the best things about process mapping, though it can get a little scary trying to do process maps in real time, but maybe you can present something and get them to do some scratching. Doing brainstorming would be level 3, and some level of voting and ranking and so forth. The next would be you're actually trying to make a decision, right? You're trying to get some sense of direction of a group, as opposed to just getting input. Now you're moving in from the converge. Now you're moving into the diverge side of things. Sorry, diverge, converge, got them exactly opposite. And then expert would be, you can design a really high quality digital interaction to make them engaging and so forth. So far, we've only had 6 votes, which I think we should have greater participation here. Though I know email takes your attention and so forth, I get it. But we've got a normal curve showing up here, with 6 people have voted so far. Any more votes? Okay, so somebody is declaring themselves an expert. So good for you. I didn't vote, by the way. So, but so we're having, so this group. I mean, obviously, it's only for the people who voted. I'm taking away, my takeaway from this is there is a certain level of comfort, and it would be interesting again to think about how you would have answered this 12 months ago, and then we could see the gap, right? Because we've all been forced to go there. We're all there. Okay, now we've got a slight leaning tilt to the left a little bit, less expert, a little more basic. Okay, that's cool. All right, so we've had 10 people, right? And again, if you want to go back, and I'm going to move on, but if you want to go back, you can do that. All right, so here's the capability maturity model that unsurprisingly has some level of alignment to the question that I just asked, right? So gosh, I was obsessing about this back at the beginning of the pandemic, about how do we, and at that time I was trying to convince my colleagues at KPMG, of which I'm obviously no longer there because I run my independent management consulting practice in Orgshift. And there is no correlation, not directly with that, but I was definitely trying to convince my colleagues that, look, we've all patting ourselves on the back for making the shift to digital delivery of our consulting services. And that's great. We should be proud of that. But so did everybody else. So therefore, how do we do it differently to perhaps be differentiated? And that was the challenge I was putting down. Okay, so incremental. What do we mean by incremental? Well, that's that basic, or sorry, entry level sort of thing. And that's where we use some tools. Whereas in interactive, it's starting to move to that divergent. How do we work in parallel? How do we get multiple ideas out really quickly? And just so the group can see what the group is thinking about, and that's an important part. And how do you prepare? So if you're pre-meeting, you want to be able to do some things. How do you make something more immersive? Now we're moving into beyond just doing screen sharing, but actually doing brainstorming, using votes, using tools like Jira, you know, so not everything has to be in real time. I think the point about a digital interaction, in fact, is you've got multiple tools at hand that allows you to work both. Right now when we're meeting, let's call that our time. But how about times when we're working in my time? And that's where collaboration platforms are really good. And Jira or Confluence is a great, and there's other, you know, Slack and other ones are great examples of that. But for us systems designers and so forth, you know, requirements is a group task. You know, it can be done very well in Journey. Or here's the process mapping piece, right? So there we go. That's how you would use your tool. And QualiWare's got some nice social collaboration kind of aspects to it that allow people to comment on things. And so I think that continues to be the way of the future. So how do we move to, you know, then we need to move to more impactful around structured note taking, trying to get to consensus, as I said, making decisions, and thinking about not just one event, but think about structuring multiple steps and multiple days or multiple interactions. And then lastly, it's all about, you know, trying to be integrated, designing an interactive and engaging end-to-end participant experience. And that this other point I want to really make an important point here. This is where all the tools, most of the tools that I find really struggle. Is my vision is that when a group is creating something, like we used to be able to create on flip charts in person, the group should manage that content. So the ideal participation or collaboration platform for this kind of group interaction, we're allowed to, we create some content together. We create those lists that say we just created. We create that content together, and then we pull that content forward into the next step, and we do something with it, just like I had on that when we unpacked the interactions. Right, we're going to maybe vote on some. We're going to distill the list. Maybe we're going to rate some of those things and do some deeper analysis. Maybe we can do a budget allocation or portfolio kind of allocation task where we give you 100 points and allocate it across as you see fit across the alternatives. And then we go further again, say now we're going to actually make some choices. Maybe we can do some action planning on those last steps. You see how we took information from one step and brought it forward into the next and the next and the next. That's really challenging to do in most platforms, and it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. And that's where I really hope Microsoft wakes up and creates that kind of interactive platform. The company that gets this right is going to be a really lucrative sell to whoever, because Microsoft or Google is going to buy them, right? That's what's going to happen. Okay. So hopefully this is making sense. So I really liked the point that was made earlier around in-person, virtual still requires facilitation, and you are dead on right. So good interactions, you know, we still require, you know, good design and facilitation. Following, you know, these 5 steps are no different doing it digitally versus otherwise. So you need to understand what you're trying to achieve. You need to understand who's involved. You want to design an engaging a process that maximizes people's ability to contribute or their contribution. Then you need to facilitate the process, as I said, pulling that content forward, and then you want to, you know, deliver the outcomes. But that's not sufficient. It's necessary, but it's not sufficient in my view for delivering great digital interactions. We need to expand the tent. And we do, oops, that's the wrong pointer. That's the one I wanted. We need to expand the tent. We need to challenge our assumption. And I think that's one of the opportunities that digital provides. I did say earlier that large groups can be problematic, but I think we can actually, you know, we want to, you know, these days it's all about EDI, and it is not electronic data interchange as the way it was when I was coming of age in the 80s. It's all about equity, diversity, and inclusion. It's about, we need to have those voices at the table. How do we design for that? How do we make sure that we get as many people into the conversation as possible and meaningfully get input from them or have them help make the decision in the first place? But we need to be careful though, especially kind of technology, is unintentionally excluding folks. And that's true of these platforms. We all know in COVID, this has not been an equitable distribution of impact. Let's be clear. Okay. I do counsel doing a escalating maturity model. Like, don't introduce doing big decision making right off the bat. Help your group get more comfortable with being online and adding more sophistication over time, right? And use the tools as much as you can right from the beginning. We need to be aware of biases, and they are there, as well as the point that was made earlier about gamification. But there are things going on, and some of the platforms, if you always address things in sort of the alphabetical order that is presented, or the sequential order that things were put up, if you start doing voting on that, there's a bias being introduced, because the things at the top always tend to get more votes than the things at the bottom. But we all know, when we actually think about it, when we do real brainstorming, the best ideas actually come at the end. So therefore, you need to mix it up when you're doing voting. And some platforms auto-magically do that. They don't present the same view of the things you're ranking or voting on. They don't present the same view to everybody. And that's really important. Break it down. So this is where my unpacking, I think, can help. What are the things that we can do? How do you break that up? I've already introduced the top about our time and my time. There are things that are better done not in our time. So things like, if you need to make a decision amongst some competing ideas, or even just directionally, and you want people to vote on that, doing that in real time will work, but it could get a bit clunky. If you gave them some time to consider it, and then in the next day or so after the meeting, give them the time to be able to reflect, and then enter their judgments, that just works so much better, so much better. So align the activity with the sort of this timing and the sequencing and what makes best sense. The agility that was mentioned earlier. So you got to plan, and you got to plan to adjust. So be nimble. Take the time, but in my view, I believe that you can. We used to be able to just throw ourselves into a room and don't give pizza and don't come out until you're done. Or we used to do that with strategic planning. We used to go off on retreat, right? And that seemed to be the only model that anybody thought would work. Great socialization. But I would question, in fact, whether it's the best outcomes would have come out of it. I think we're pining for perhaps a process that was better for interaction socially than it was for interaction to drive great output. We'll see. I think we're a bit nostalgic about that. But in this day and age, right now, if I could use that expression, we need to give the opportunity for folks to rest and reflect. And I think we need to make the best use of our time together. So when you have that hour, make the best use of it, make it engaging, get the most out of the group, and then move on. I believe ultimately you can actually have a better process that involves more perspectives, will result in better work product, and actually have greater stakeholder buy-in if you do it right. So I wanted to make sure that I left behind some information for you, and this is a constantly shifting landscape. So some of this is going to be already out of date. The top line is what I call fully featured virtual cloud interaction or digital interaction cloud-based tools. Some of you are probably familiar with Mural and Miro. Those are really popular platforms. They use a Post-it note kind of metaphor, and they're really cool. But they need a good facilitator. But the thing that I think they have that I would like to see them have better is the ability to manipulate the groups of input, and being able to better manage the collection of things that you've brainstormed. I find them they're great for creating it. In terms of letting the group manage it, I think there's still some places to go here. Slido is a very similar platform to Mentimeter in that it's great for great input. I'm hopefully showing you Mentimeter, by the way, comes from Stockholm, of all places, and is doing great things. Private company, I can't imagine this Mentimeter is what PowerPoint slideshow should be, but isn't. So Microsoft might buy them. We'll see. Who knows? Who knows? But I fully expect them to be bought by somebody at some point in the not too distant future. So a couple of neat Canadian examples, or maybe, and there's some other ones. This used to be called MeetingSphere, great platform. Storms and Power Noodles sort of share a tile-based metaphor, which is very cool. And Group Map, for those who like the mind mapping metaphor, and mind mapping in another platform, really, really excellent. And a different approach to organizing ideas through connections. Really interesting. I haven't had much chance to play with it. But two Canadian examples are Power Noodle and Thought Exchange. Power Noodle, full disclosure, I am a user of Power Noodle, and I love using it for groups. They're from Stratford, Ontario, and I never saw that coming. I only discovered them 15 months ago. They've been around since 2013. And the reason Power Noodle got created is because its founder, Deb Krizmanich, actually ended up contracting H1N1. I mean, how weird is that, right? So she needed a platform. She thought, I need to be able to collaborate with all my colleagues and my clients, and I don't see any alternative out there. So she created Power Noodle. Good for her. But a very, very cool platform. Thought Exchange, the other Canadian one, is from BC. It turns, it's all on its head. It's a disruptor. So if you wanted to run a town hall with 1,000 people or 10,000 people, you could, and you'd get an amazing input or output done in an hour to 2 hours. And because it allows people to brainstorm, similar to the way we've just been doing a Mentimeter if you've been using your phone. But then it cleverly presents you with what other people have been proposing, and it does it in a really rigorous and AI-driven way, so that you get to rate, if you've put up one item, you get to rate 10 or 20 of other people's items, and it actually starts to develop a group consensus. It's really flipping cool, and I'm really looking forward to having my first time with that. But who knows? So here's those. But the top line is more fully featured, and then there's kind of more specialized. And some might argue that Miro is more fully featured, end to end. Maybe I just find Mural it provides a little bit more. Okay. So what are some ways, and I do have some tips that follow after this one. So what are some ways, given what you've learned today and from your own experience, that you think you can engage better, digitally? What are some ideas that you want to offer up to the group to consider to create better digital interactions? So yeah, using the underutilized tool, and I'm as guilty as anybody. I should be using it more. Also, one thing that I keep forgetting is you can actually, if you turn on the tool, annotate somebody's slide, in real time, which I think is just cool. You can try spread. So that I think I see a lot of facilitators doing that. There's a lot of power in doing that. Mentimeter has a pretty reasonable cost base. The Wacom tablet, okay, I'll bite. Maybe if somebody could put into the chat of the go-to training to give me a sense of what. Whoops, sorry. Oh, what happened? I apologize for that. That was me. What is Wacom tablet? That is news to me. Reminds me of Watcom, but that's showing my University of Waterloo roots. Facilitation skills, those don't go away. Yeah, I agree. It should all be interconnected. That's what I think. I'm sure somebody's thinking about this at Microsoft or Google or elsewhere. But I like what I would like. I'd like to see Mentimeter embedded in Teams. What I would like is Power Noodle embedded in Teams. I want it to be as easy to do as sharing my screen. And then, but there will be some setup stuff that I think I need to do around the background to make sure that it works. But it shouldn't be that hard. Any other ideas out there? You're all big users of QualiWare. Have any of you used some of the more collaborative aspects of it, like commenting on diagrams and things like that? So commentating, that's good. These are all good ideas. So the suggestion box, polls, yeah, and kudos to Cecile for using the poll. I also really liked what Cecile did. Says we're going to try something different. I did rehearse this, but it might not work. So bear with me. Showing a little humility is one thing, and being able to see we're going to try some things on. That's also really, I think, effective with a group about engaging digitally. Is framing it as a journey of learning together. I think would be a really good frame, right? And we're doing that with my client that I'm working with, Stephen Davies, running a strategic planning exercise. We are learning together. We're going to try on some things. In fact, we're going to try on a couple of things that I'm going to be showing you in just a minute or two. Okay. Wacom tablet simplify. Oh, there's the, okay, thank you. Oh, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. There's also the Remarkable tablet, which is remarkable, which is kind of cool. Okay, I'm gonna move on. And so these are some great ideas. And I'm also trying to show you. So what would be even better here in Multimeter is Mentimeter, not Multimeter. I don't know what Multimeter is. Mentimeter is I'd like to be able to, for you to be able to click on one of these items and start commenting on it. I mean, wouldn't that be cool? You'd like to be able to build on an idea. Right now, this platform doesn't let you do that. I'd love to see that. So here's one tip of two. Hopefully I provided more than that. This book was, talk about real time, was published earlier this year, coming out of Stanford. Kurzat and Glenn, all about rituals. So how do we make our virtual meetings more humane, to their point, by adding a ritual, which is something you do repeatedly as a group, following a pattern or a script, which imbues symbolism and meaning for the group. So I'm not going to get all spiritual on you. Don't worry, not going to happen. But I think we can all relate to the concept of how can we make these virtual meetings feel better? How can we make them more humane? And we can do that by adding some points in the agenda, usually at the start, somewhere in the middle, and somewhere at the end, that helps build energy and connection between the individuals that are meeting. So as an example, actually on late last week, late on Friday afternoon, it was late on Friday afternoon, and we were presenting some results to my client, Stephen Davies and I. And I was actually presenting them with some information about rituals. So we were running a little short of time, and I had a plan for one ritual, which allows people to have a end with a punchline of a joke, and then but you just provide the punchline. You don't provide anything else, which is kind of funny. But we didn't do that because we were running out of time. So I asked people, I said, can you just take 30 seconds and be quiet? So I'm not taking 30 seconds. It felt like 30 seconds for me. But take a few seconds as a group and just listen. Now you're starting to synchronize. Something as simple as that really helps with group work. And this book has a whole host of great ideas for building team through rituals. Something as simple as introducing yourself, and using one of those icebreakers, right? The usual old icebreakers. Those work too. Don't rely on the same one all the time. Though if a group decides that they want to do something all the time, that maybe they want, you could say a prayer if you want to go that way. Somebody could sing a song or have some sort of group challenge of some kind, whatever. Try to make it interesting. Try to make it, humane. I fall back on that term. So here's another tip, and gosh, I use this one a lot. I use oh, dogs are perfect icebreakers, or the kids that crawl over their parents in whatever time of day. Another one, I've got a colleague that I work with from the Nous group who There's a cat who constantly gets in the way of the camera, and he doesn't care, and I love it. I love it. So how do you, polls, picking up on the polls idea, you can use polls in really interesting ways. You can use polls to gauge how a group is doing, how are you feeling? Or you can use polls like this particular model, to gauge agreement to whatever it is that you're trying to get agreement on. And so I call this these 7 ways to say yes and 1 way to say no. Now, I don't tend to use the 7-point scale all the time, or the 8-point scale. I tend to make it like a 4 or 5-point scale because you get too many options. But this comes from Sam Kainer, who wrote the brilliant book Facilitator's Guide to Participatory Decision Making way back in 1996. I believe it has been updated. But allows people to, let's say you put a proposal up, and it could be about moving on, it could be something quite radical or contentious, but you ask the question, to what extent do you agree with the proposal? A 1, fully endorse it, we're go. A 2 would be, yes, I completely agree, except I've got maybe a contention, or I might have a question. So we want to talk about that. 3 would be, I can live with this, I'm good with it. 4 would be, I'm just not going to make a comment, but I'm not going to stand in the way. So you can see how you're providing lots of different ways. And so when you present this back to the group, you do a quick poll, you put up the results, and if everybody's agreeing, you move on, right? Or if you've got a bit of a spectrum over on the left-hand side, and you got, then you can actually ask the question, okay, what is the point, right? So what is the question that needs to be asked? And so people, see, here's the thing, if people see at least one person who isn't necessarily agreeing with the thing that's being put up, they're going to feel empowered to make the following statement. And I hear it all the time, and I love it when it happens. I said X because, and that's the nugget. There, now you're breaking through. It's because you want to get to the because, you want to get to the why. Most recently, I've used this with a town planning exercise with a couple of actually towns when I was working with KPMG, and we were doing strategic delivery reviews, and we put up some findings. The team from KPMG had created 5 key findings of their current state review in these two situations, and actually before the meeting, we put those up in the Power Noodle platform, and ask people to rate their level of agreement with the finding. And it worked really well. So before we even get into the room, 1, we have a sense of where the group, and the group doesn't have visibility to the rating of the votes at that point. We show that in the meeting when we actually have the meeting. But what they do have visibility is to the second thing, because the Power Noodle platform does allow the commenting and replying to the items that are there. They can actually provide their feedback in their time, not in our time, in their own individual time. They can actually provide comments and replies or suggestions for changes. So now everybody in the group can actually see what the rest of the group is thinking or reacting to or commenting. Of course, this is all done anonymously unless people choose to identify themselves. Very cool use. This is something that we need to use more and more of, and easy to set up. And you can do this regardless of platform. Okay, so again, no COVID hair jokes here. Now, which is here's another Mentimeter function. Click or poke, whatever you're using platform. Which one do you prefer? The one on the left or the one on the right? So we have 2 people saying on the right. I mean, I think the answer is relatively obvious, right? I'm actually looking at the camera. And I'll tell you what, that is hard to do. I'm tried to bring my video of myself on my own platform here as high as possible on my screen so that I can look at that little green dot that's up here. And I'll tell you what, it is hard to do. If I look down and look at the bottom of my screen, you're getting the, my eyelids. It's really hard to focus and look at that HAL-like dot on my computer. So now you know why. So it's something as simple as camera's on, yes, but look like you're paying attention and look like you're looking at people. Just saying. Okay. So I have come to the end before we get to the questions, if there were any, and other dialogue. And I'm going to ask Cecile to moderate if people are putting their hand up in the platform to actually talk, because I'd love to hear from you and ask a question that way. Digital doesn't have to be second best. We don't have to accept it as it's just different, and we can make it better. We can embrace it, and we can go just beyond virtual. And quite frankly, our clients, our staff, our leaders really need us to make this happen, to model it and make it happen. Okay. So mystified was I think it came in as a question when it should have been a whatever. So I think that was the one question here. I don't think there were any others. Were there? No. Okay, so that was it. So I'm going to open it up here, and let's have a conversation. So Cecile, I'm going to rely on you to make sure. So if you want to either put a chat in saying I would like the mic, or so again, I'm not that familiar with GoTo training. Is there a way to put your hand up?
There is. So there's a couple of different things that people can do. There is a raise your hand capability, and there is also the chat, and people can just unmute. We're a small but friendly group, so if anybody has questions, please feel free. One question I had, Chris, while you were going through that, and that was a really great session, thank you. These platforms that you use for the types of exercises that you took us through today, are the people who participate in them anonymous to each other or visible to each other? So as we were answering your questions, I'm assuming you could see who was providing, but we couldn't see. Is that the preferred way? Are there other options for those kinds of interactions?
In some of the platforms, you can turn on that kind of identification, but I don't recommend it.
That was going to be my next question. Was what do you recommend it be? Yeah.
No, what I prefer is letting the group see what the group is saying or writing, and making their own judgment call about that. There's a very famous experiment, and I always get it somewhat wrong. But of how do you avoid groupthink? And this was an experiment back, I think, in the 60s. Solomon Ash, I think, is the person who did it. And I always get it not quite right. But imagine that the test subject in this usual university student-led exercise, is sitting at the end of a row of 10 people, and everybody else is in on the experiment. And a set of lines, vertical lines, are put on a whiteboard, and one, or maybe a piece of paper, and one is slightly shorter than the rest. And what the question that gets asked is, are all those lines the same length? And the first person says yes, and the second person says yes, and so forth. And you get to the last person, this poor test subject. Now 9 people ahead of that person has said they're the same. What's the outcome? Well, unsurprisingly, most of the time, 80% of the time or so, again, I'm getting the numbers not quite right, that person will go with the flow, just because of the pressure. So the question I asked to you is how much does it take? How many people does it take to get that last person to flip, so that 80% of the time at least will actually say yes, it is actually shorter?
I would imagine it wouldn't be very much.
less than one, as it turns out. And the reason it's less than one is that one person, as long as one person expressed some doubt, then that person will flip and say that. So that's the thing, right? We're always looking, we're coalition builders, I think, by genome. We're looking for ways to connect with others, and we're shy about potentially putting something out there that is either other people won't like, or might be somewhat contentious, or will just reflect a personal view. But as soon as you see somebody else's idea out there that looks remotely consistent or amplifies your idea or is connected in some way, that's going to give you the strength, the internal fortitude to get your idea out there. And that's where the anonymization is so important.
It's important because I would imagine it would be it would be even more pronounced if the boss is participating in those sessions, and then you see the boss's name go up on the screen with what their idea is. Yeah, I can see that.
You have to do it without attribution.
Yeah, we do have a question. Annette wanted to ask, what tool do you use the most and why?
Well, I am making significant use of Mentimeter only because it's such a good platform. But what it doesn't have, as I mentioned earlier, it's great for these sort of webinars and these sort of things. But what it doesn't have is the ability to manipulate the information either by me or by the group. And so, as I mentioned earlier, the Power Noodle platform is definitely one I'm using a lot these days. And it's not cheap, just like QualiWare is not cheap. To be clear, that'll make Kevin laugh. So it's just, it is what it is. Mural and Miro, are probably a little less in investment, but I don't use them much. But definitely Power Noodle and Mentimeter I'm using the most of. I am learning because now that I've been introduced to Trello, great tool, and because it integrates with Jira so well, it's just such a natural. It's just such a good connection there. Where was I going? Can't remember. I got distracted by Trello.
Yeah.
Google Forms. There's some neat stuff. So you can collect data. You can do some things in Google I didn't realize even existed. Like even just collaborative documents. I mean, this is Microsoft still got a long way to go to get to Google's, I think, maturity when it comes to collaborative document making.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to use a Google Doc or a Google Sheet to be able to work collaboratively, you still got some ways to go there.
Yeah, Alain actually put into the chat one tool that was not mentioned. You just mentioned it now, Trello. That's really nice for collaborating while on a call is Trello.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's absolutely good. It's great that way, and I haven't had the pleasure to use it other than I know it's part of the Atlassian group of tools.
Not to put you on the spot there, Alain, but did you want to share what it does? Not to put you on the spot, but
Yeah, sure, absolutely, and I use it a lot in a past life. But you can create different boards for different type of activities that you need to do. It'd be a compliance board or a risk board or just for employee tracking things. But it's really cool, and you're not paid by board, so you can create as much as you want, and then you can invite all the people that you need to participate on that. And it's a little bit like the sticky notes that Chris was showing earlier. You can put the sticky notes in the right columns, you can move stuff around right to left, and while you're on the call, you use it like most people have second screens, you use it on your second screen, and it's not really tied to the call, so it's really well intended. I think it was well thought out, and it's a pretty easy tool to use too.
Thank you. Scott has asked a question. How would you approach getting people to a similar level of expertise? Did you want to expand on that, Scott? You can, yeah.
You want to go verbal?
Do you want to unmute yourself, Scott? Oh, he's probably doing something. There you are.
Yeah, I'm jumping around from different computers. So I'm very technical. I play around with all the settings and everything else, but not everyone has that capabilities. But when you're in a meeting, it's really hard to get people involved if they don't know the tools. So what would be a good approach that you would consider to get everyone kind of at the same level?
You mean with the use of the collaborative tools?
Use of the collaborative, I can't talk today.
That's okay.
collaborative tools, or even like in a regular meeting, there's so much that's not used that's available. And it's hard to teach people to use it when the opportunity to use it is never there.
So a couple of things. One is know your purpose. So today, I've attended one other user group meeting, but we're not a work group. We're not an intact work group. We're not trying to do something together. So therefore, it's very ad hoc. And when you have ad hoc groups of any kind, you got to keep the lowest common denominator. Make it as easy as possible to use. Which is one reason why I really like Mentimeter. I don't think anybody actually had a technical challenge to get connected to it today, either through a phone or through a browser window or tablet, whatever. It all works, which is, and I'm touch wood, not had it fail yet. So for that kind of ad hoc meeting, I think, and you need to design, very deliberately, points of interaction and collaboration. The one thing that I am glad we're having right now is and again, the web, because it's more of a webinar format, what I prefer in groups to do is have a combination of talking and typing, because the energy level goes up when there's good talking. Now, obviously, we can only talk one at a time. So taking my answer to the next step would be, when you have a work group that is going to be doing something together on a more regular basis, then one, you need to design in, understand your purpose and design in interaction elements. And don't just think about the time we are meeting, think about the times when we're not meeting and what work could be potentially done outside of that meeting, and using whatever tool makes sense. I'm not going to promote one versus another. I love the idea of using Confluence pages as ways of collaborating for keeping things up to date in the meantime, or Trello or Google, whatever makes sense. And so, but for more intact or purposeful work groups, you need to be pretty intentional about the person who's leading the group or is in charge of leading the group, which isn't necessarily the leader or the facilitator. I think this needs to design for it and build it in. Like I said, I think on an earlier slide, do it from the beginning and introduce it over time. And don't try to hit a home run the first time. Do something incremental. And I think incremental works really well for introducing it over time and raise the level. So don't try to do some double scale or multiple scale, multi-criteria decision making right off the bat. But what you could do is things like brainstorm. Let's say risk management. Brainstorm a bunch of risks. Review that risks. Use the sticky dots to reduce that risk to a reasonable set, a number. And then the next step would be, which is definitely goes up the maturity level, get them to do a rating of impact, and probability, the two scales. And then you end up with a lovely 2x2 coming out of it. And then you can go to the next step, which is actually making some decisions about that. So, or action planning. You could see even just through the nature of the interaction, I've started slow. Brainstorming's easy, and then rating and ranking and prioritization comes afterwards. That would be my advice.
Cool, thank you. Okay, I think that might be all of the questions. I'm gonna just sort of say that slowly to give someone the opportunity to ask something else. I think that's the end of the questions, Chris.
Okay, very good. A couple of people have put down and even answered the question, what do you take away from today? So thank you for that. Those are, I don't know who put that in, but thank you.
And I was also going to include,
again,
there are lots of ways. I meant to type it in, but I got talking, and that there's lots of ways to make the sessions more interactive. There are lots of options out there. That's one thing I learned today.
Mm-hmm. And there's no right answer, and I'm happy to engage with any of you if you've got you want to talk about different ways of interacting. This is definitely a passion of mine, and love to collaborate. Okay. I will stop sharing then.
So you mentioned earlier that you were going to make those slides available. So we recorded the session today. So that recording is going to be available up on our YouTube channel for everyone. So Chris, how do you want to do, will we make the slides available separately, or how do we want to do that?
I'll send them to you and you can decide how you want to distribute them.
So Chris, thank you very much for the presentation today. It was really interesting, and I know I certainly took some things away from it. I think the participants did as well. For everyone who is on the call, the session was recorded. As I mentioned, it will be posted on our CloseReach YouTube channel. We will have Chris's slides available as well, and we'll post them on our website for you to download. And if you have any questions, follow up. Chris, on your slide deck, is there a your contact information at the beginning or the end or somewhere?
Yes, there is.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, everyone. I believe that's it for today. And as we all voted that we are going to take a pause for the summer. Enjoy your summer, everyone. I wish everybody good health, and we will be back in September. In the meantime, send through your ideas for future sessions, things that you'd like to see from other departments, topics that are of interest, and we will make sure to put them into our agenda for upcoming meetings. That's it for me. Thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy your summer. See you in a few months. Bye for now.
All right.
Bye. Thank you, Cecile.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Have a nice summer.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye. Bye. Thank you.